Hey, my name is Emily Carson. I'm 42 years old, divorced, and live alone in a quiet area on the edge of Portland. Life hasn't been very exciting or interesting the past few years. I work from home as a freelance editor, so I spend most of my days typing away on my laptop, drinking way too much coffee, and talking to my cat Luna as if she understood me. 3 years ago, my husband Mark and I finalized our divorce. It wasn't messy, just sad we grew apart slowly, like two people drifting on separate rafts in a wide ocean. There was no betrayal, no blow-up, just a cold distance that neither of us tried hard enough to cross. Since then, I've been living a life that, while stable, felt a bit hollow. It was on a Thursday evening in October that everything began to change. Rain poured outside in sheets, and I hadn't eaten all day. I scrolled through the food delivery apps craving something warm and finally settled on Alfredo pasta from a local Italian place called Marco's Kitchen. I clicked order and curled up under a blanket to wait about 30 minutes later. The doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw a young man standing on my porch, dripping wet but smiling politely. He couldn't have been more than 18. He wore a red raincoat that clung to his shoulders and held a paper bag in one hand. "Delivery for Emily?" he asked, brushing wet strands of hair from his forehead. "Yes, that's me," I said, taking the food. I noticed how soaked he was. "Wow, you must be freezing." "That's just the job. It's not so bad once you get used to it," he said with a small laugh. I gave him a cash tip, but he shook his head and said, "It's okay, ma'am. Stay dry and enjoy your dinner." The way he said it stuck with me. It wasn't just nice. As I watched him walk back to his bike in the rain, I felt a strange pull in my chest. I brushed it off and went back inside. The next week, on another cold evening, I found myself craving pasta again. Maybe it was the comfort of the meal or the chance to see the same delivery boy again. I placed the order, and sure enough, 30 minutes later, he was at my door. "Back again," he said with a smile, shaking off his raincoat. "Guess I'm addicted to Alfredo." He laughed, gave me the bag, and said, "Hey, it's the best on the menu, I don't blame you." I gave him a cup of tea that time because I thought he might like something warm. He thought for a moment and then said, "That would be nice, thank you." He stood at the doorway while I made him a quick cup of chamomile. We talked briefly about the weather, the restaurant, and how busy he'd been that night. His name was Jason Miller, and he had just turned 18. He worked delivery shifts to save money for community college, and he lived with his mom and younger sister. For someone his age, he seemed very grounded. Over the next few weeks, my pasta cravings got worse, and Jason seemed to be assigned to my area most nights. Our short conversations turned into longer ones, and he'd sometimes sit on the porch with me for a few minutes while he drank tea or just caught his breath. One night, it was unusually cold, and I noticed that he looked very tired. I asked him if everything was okay and gave him a hot drink. He sighed and said, "My bike chain broke halfway through the shift, so I've been walking most of the way." I told him, "That's terrible. Come in and at least sit down for a while." He hesitated, but eventually stepped inside. I pointed him to the kitchen table and handed him a towel. That night, our conversations stretched into hours. He told me about his life, how his dad had left when he was 10, how his mum worked 2 jobs, how he tried to help out as much as he could. He had dreams of studying computer science and eventually designing apps. I was struck by his sincerity, his drive, and how much responsibility he carried on his young shoulders. I told him a bit about my life too, how I'd once dreamed of becoming a novelist, how I ended up editing other people's stories instead, and how quiet the house had felt since the divorce. It was the first time in a long while that I felt like someone truly listened. After that night, Jason began stopping by even when he wasn't delivering food. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes just conversation. He'd help me carry groceries in or fix little things around the house. He was never pushy or inappropriate, just kind, genuinely kind. At first, I worried what people might think a woman in her 40s spending time with a teenager, but nothing about it felt wrong. He wasn't just a delivery boy, he had become a friend, someone who brought light back into my quiet world. One Saturday, I was struggling to assemble a bookshelf I'd ordered online. When Jason came over to return a book I had lent him, I almost begged him to help. He laughed and said, "I guess you didn't read the directions." The whole afternoon was spent building it together. When it was done, the living room was full of laughter and the smell of pizza. That night, we ate dinner on the floor and talked about movies, hopes, and childhood memories. I hadn't laughed that hard in years, and as time went on, I looked forward to his visits. My days seemed lighter, so I picked up writing again, not for work but for fun, short stories and journal entries. It was like being with him opened up a part of me. When we were sitting on the back porch one night watching the sky turn purple and gold, I forgot about it. He looked at me and said, "You know, Emily, you've kind of become my safe space." "What do you mean?" I asked him when he spoke. He seemed thoughtful. "I don't really have anyone I can talk to like this with you. I can just be me, not the guy who has to hold everything together, just Jason." I smiled and said, "You've done more for me than you know." There was a long silence, but it was peaceful and comfortable. We didn't need to say anything else. The bond we shared wasn't romantic or familial. It was just a connection based on trust, understanding, and kindness. We celebrated with takeout and cake, and he promised to still stop by even after classes started. He kept his word, though not as often, but enough. Looking back, I can see how much that part of my life healed me. Jason reminded me of the small pleasures in life, like connection, laughter, and hope. He didn't just appear out of nowhere like a hero in a dramatic story. He came with a paper bag of pasta on a rainy night and slowly brought colour back into my life. He didn't just deliver food, he delivered light. And that 20-year-old delivery boy changed my life forever by just being himself.